Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Who would have thought that in 2024 we'd be talking about GameStop again? Reddit, meme stocks, all that sort of stuff. It was a big story in 2021 when the share price of GameStop, a struggling chain of video game shops in the US, suddenly shot up. In less than a month, it went from about $19 to almost $500. And suddenly everyone was talking about meme stocks, shares driven higher by internet speculation. Now it's happening again with the re-emergence of one of the main players in this space, a meme stock trader known as Roaring Kitty. There you go. That's the nice version of his name. Today, I wanted to get a 101 on meme stocks, how traders make money, why it's so risky, and why companies like GameStop and AMC are back in the news. Of course, this is general information only. You should certainly seek professional advice before making investment decisions. Chris Brycki is the founder and chief executive officer of online investment advisor Stockspot. Chris, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me back.
Let's start with the very basics. What is a meme stock and how did it get its name, or how did they get their name?
Well, meme stocks, Sean, came about back during lockdowns when people had a lot of time on their hands. Stock trading had become a hot thing to do in your spare time. And while you were working for a lot of people as well, people had a lot of spare cash because they weren't traveling. They weren't using that money for other things. And so thousands and thousands in Australia and millions of people in the US were setting up online stockbroking accounts to essentially speculate on stocks. And, you know, this isn't a new thing. It's happened over the decades many times before. I think the difference this time was that big groups of people were aggregating behind very small illiquid businesses and pushing their share prices up astronomical amounts. And then ultimately they fell by big amounts as well. And the memes, I think, were just how these stories spread and how these stocks became popular. So people were posting memes on Reddit and other social media sites to basically promote these stocks that they were trying to pump up.
Was there, saying GameStop was one of them, AMC was another one back in 2021. Was there any sort of rhythm or method 3 years ago to the stocks that did run?
Well, there was. So that internet personality you mentioned, Roaring Kitty, he actually was starting to promote these stocks back in 2019 and not a lot of people were taking notice. And his thesis was that although these businesses weren't performing well, in fact, they were all struggling businesses, there were a few big hedge funds out there that actually were very, very short these businesses. So basically betting that their share prices would fall a long way or ultimately to zero. But being short a lot of stock actually exposes anyone, including hedge funds, to a lot of risk if the share prices rise. So what he was trying to orchestrate was a lot of people squeezing these stocks up and basically forcing the hedge funds to buy back their shorts, ultimately causing the share prices to rise even further and allowing people to sell at a really high price. Now, when he first tried to do this in 2019, it didn't really get a lot of traction. But then, for whatever reason, it really took off in January 2021.
Okay, so the re-emergence of Roaring Kitty, his real name is Keith Gill. He has all sorts of pseudonyms, ones on Reddit which involve very nasty swear words, but, quite a character, obviously. I think he appeared before Congress at some point and he conceded he wasn't actually a cat. The re-emergence of Keith Gill, why is everyone so excited about that, given all he has done thus far is put up a kind of a drawing of a person looking like he's leaning forward gaming? Why are we so excited by that?
Well, first of all, he has become a bit of a phenomenon online in terms of internet personalities. He made a lot of money out of the initial meme stock boom. He had to testify, as you mentioned, to Congress, and now a movie's been made about him that I think came out in the last year as well. I haven't seen it yet. I'm very keen to, but he's got a huge following of millions of people, and his account basically went silent after the initial meme stock boom and bust back in 2021. So the fact that he has posted something, I think, has stoked people's curiosity, and maybe it's just aligned with a time where people have some spare time and some spare cash to trade again. I think from what I've seen over the decades, when there are these booms and busts, they almost happen a bit like an earthquake, where you have the initial earthquake and then aftershocks that come sort of at random points in time afterwards. And usually the aftershocks are smaller than the initial one, but they lead to the share prices sort of popping up and then falling back again. And it feels like this is just one of those aftershocks.
So off air, you mentioned you used the phrase pump and dump, and that has been something that if you don't know what a pump and dump is, watch The Wolf of Wall Street. That's one of the classic cases of a pump and dump stock, Steve Madden, I think, in that instance. But this has sort of been going on in one form or another for a long time, Chris.
Well, it has. I mean, this isn't new, although the stocks are new, and the way that it's being done on Reddit is a bit of a new phenomenon. And the fact that such large groups of people can get behind it in the US, stock trading apps like Robinhood, the idea of stocks getting pumped up, on not a lot of fundamental reasons, has existed for generations. I mean, one of the most famous examples in Australia, and listeners could research this one online that weren't around then, was the Poseidon nickel boom of 1969 and 1970, where a little mining company made a small nickel discovery. And its share price went from about 80 cents to $280 and then fell all the way back down. Again, it comes down to large groups of people getting excited and feeling that fear of missing out. And I'm not sure who's quoted. I think it's a Buffett quote, but certainly a famous investor said before that there's nothing more painful than your friends and other people making money in the share market when you're missing out. And I think meme stocks have really stoked that fear of missing out in people. They want to be part of it. They want to be able to tell their friends at the barbecue that they're involved as well. Unfortunately, what usually happens is that there's a small group of people that make money out of these things and a much larger group of people that lose money out of these things. And if you have a look at the research and stats about trading generally, you see this, that only about 1% of people who are day trading or trying to trade stocks actually make long-term returns consistently or actually do well out of this. 99% of people do poorly. And on the other hand, if you just set and forget in index funds, which we've discussed before as our strategy, you've got a much better hit rate of actually making money over the long run. It's just very boring.
Stay with me, Chris. We'll be back in a minute. I'm speaking to Chris Brycki, founder and CEO of online investment advisor Stockspot. What about the companies involved? So GameStop, AMC is another one. What's it mean for them? Because they're not being traded on their fundamentals here. They're actually being traded on momentum or something. What's it mean for those companies?
Well, they're the real beneficiaries. I mean, they've really struck out with some luck, these businesses, because they're struggling traditional businesses, old cinema businesses and traditional retail businesses selling video games. There's obviously a bit of nostalgia to these businesses, which is part of, I think, the reason people have got behind them. But they're not generating any earnings growth. They're not generating, growth in dividends. They're certainly not strongly performing businesses. So when these pump and dumps have happened in the past, and again, this happened yesterday with AMC, it's a great opportunity for them to raise capital because they know that their business is worth a lot less than the share price is indicating. And if you're a business, the best capital management you can do is actually raise money when your share price is higher than your fair value.
This stuff, I mean, you mentioned Poseidon nickel then. 2021 was mostly about US stocks. Does it mean in more recent years, has it happened elsewhere outside the US?
And yeah, booms and busts have happened all over the place, not just in the recent decades, but back to the 1600s and 1700s. The tulip boom was another famous one. The Japan boom in the late 1980s was another one. I think there's a human aspect of human psyche that just gets excited about things going up and chasing momentum. And it's very hard to predict when these things are going to pop up, how long they're going to last. And that's why it's very hard to make money out of them. But they do happen. And I think it's inevitable that they continue to happen. I don't think there's very much way that governments or regulators can kind of regulate them out because it's just, human psyche of greed and fear.
And at the end of the day, Roaring Kitty isn't doing anything wrong, or is he? I'm not sure. Maybe if he's pushing a stock without a license, he's doing something wrong.
Yes, it's a good ethical question, and I think ASIC in Australia has actually gone after a few stocks brokers who are unlicensed on the basis that they don't actually have a license to provide what's deemed to be financial advice. So I think that's one area that anyone considering this in Australia needs to be very, very careful of. It's pumping stocks and online stock groups, and I believe in Australia there were some on Discord and some of these other apps that are sort of secret apps. They've been caught out and got in a lot of trouble for, and people have been banned from doing this sort of thing. And there's obviously ethical questions about it as well because you're really moving something in a way that's going to definitely cause harm to a large group of people, and you're just trying to get out early enough to not lose money. Yeah, I don't particularly think it's an ethical way of making money, but it certainly, certainly creates a lot of stories and headlines, and is a very, interesting thing for people to follow. And I think, the one positive I think out of it in 2021 is it introduced a whole new generation of people to the share market. And I think if you are going to be investing in the share market and learn your hard lessons, you want to learn those very early. So I was hopeful in 2021 that those people who did ultimately lose money in these meme stocks learned the lesson that actually share trading is not a great way of building wealth, but the share market is a great way of building wealth, just not in that way.
Okay, so you've more or less given us the moral of the story there. But in terms of Stockspot, you don't chase meme stocks. You are much more a longer-term holder of stocks. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, we invest in ETFs, which invest in the market index. Now, occasionally there'll be a meme stock within the index, but it will be such a small part of the index, it won't really have a noticeable impact. It's not something we would chase or recommend clients chase, just because there's no proven strategy of how to make money out of these things. You can get very lucky, like Roaring Kitty did, and make millions of dollars. But just like the lottery, for every person that makes $1 million, there's tens of thousands that have lost a smaller amount as well. So it's really just transferring money from one group to another.
Chris, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
My pleasure.
That was Chris Brycki, founder and CEO of online investment advisor Stockspot. This is the Fear and Greed business interview. Remember, this is general information only, and you should seek professional advice before making investment decisions. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.